with by Ankur Warikoo, the author and internet entrepreneur. And I can go on talking about Ankur, but I think what we're going to hear through this conversation are we're going to try and tap into your mind, Ankur, and try and see how you would envision the India. If you really came out of a dream one day, what's that dream India you'd like to see? And let's see how best we can articulate that in words and give a vision to people as they hear this conversation between the two of us. Of course, idea is to see how we can really talk about something that's going to be significantly important for a country like India if we are to unlock our true potential and position ourselves as global leaders of the future. Is our leadership, right? How do we really shape the leaders of tomorrow? In our country we have a great demographic dividend. We talk about our youth. We talk about 1 in 10 people in the world being an Indian under the age of 25, and all of them are going to be key drivers of the global economy and everything else that the world is going to see 25 years from today. So really, how do we shape leadership? If we'll try and keep that as a core theme, but of course, as I said, this is a freewheeling chat, and would love to get some aspects of how we could look at the future together. As you're aware, India is celebrating its 75th year of independence, and the government and all stakeholders of society deeply engaged in not only celebrating what we have achieved, but also really taking proactive calls on what we can do to accelerate ourselves towards realizing the aspirational vision, of 1.4 billion people in this country. The Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav is one opportunity for us to not only reflect on our achievements, but also, address some of these core challenges and really see how opportunities can be created, even over the short term. Also, how do we get more people to participate in nation building? How do we make this a very collaborative effort? CII has championed this agenda for the past 15 years, ever since India turned 60. And I think what we see today over this 15-year journey is a reflection of some of the catalytic kind of initiatives that industry, government, multiple stakeholders coming together have been able to take to position ourselves to where we are. There is a crazy challenging time going around us, but I think somewhere India, we are holding our own, and we are seeing how we can march into the future, far deeper, far stronger than many other countries, that where they are today. So I think in that light, would love to see how we can propel ourselves into the future. But maybe the best place for us to start is, you and I have both been young people at some point in time, but today's youth is significantly different, right? One of the businesses we are in is gaming and esports, and we see how Gen Zs are thinking and what the way they approach life and how they are going to shape their own future, and in the process the future of our country. So probably a great way to start is how do you see the difference in the youth today compared to the earlier generation, and what could be some of the key things that we should look out for as we move?
Sure. Firstly, thank you for having me, Rajan. It's a pleasure to be on stage with you and having this particular conversation, which is so dear to my heart, because a fair bit of my time goes in speaking to the youth of the country, trying to understand their motivations, their drivers, their inspirations. And it's fascinating, as you rightly started with the question of how distinct they are from the era that you and I belong to. I remember growing up in India in the 1980s was a time where things used to come not as per your demand, but as per when they wanted to or when they could. And there was, not by choice, but by design, this long gestation period or waiting time to get everything in life, whether it was something as fundamental as milk or a telephone line or a phone connection, a scooter, a watch, or anything. And today's generation is literally on demand. And they want the best books, the best movies, the best cabs, anything that they want is literally at the click of a button at the speed of thought. what I also found that's happened because of the wonderful time that the country has gone through in the last 2 or 3 decades is the sheer audacity or the courage that the youth has in terms of how they want to live their life. We come from a very risk-averse background where becoming an engineer, a doctor, a lawyer were just, that's pretty much it. If you decided anything outside of that, you were taking a mega risk in your life. And most certainly that risk was not to pan out for you as successfully as you would want it to. But today, almost on a single daily basis, I find so many people who are questioning whether these are the traditional lines that they should even follow. They are thinking of completely new ways of imagining their career. They're also very well aware that their career is no longer a 40-year commitment. Instead is a 5 to 10 year sprint that they undertake. And it's quite likely that every 5 to 10 years, they'll be coming up with another career, another career, another career. And if I were to summarize the youth of today and the leaders of tomorrow in 3 mega trends, one would certainly be the courage with which they approach things, the willingness to take risk and understand risk, not because they are risk loving and thus impractical or very flimsy in their approach. It's because they understand risk and they are able to mitigate that to the best of their effort, which is incredible. I also find that the youth of this country is very quickly becoming location agnostic. There is nothing that binds them to a certain location. With the advent of internet and the global borders opening up in such a way in the last 2 years and giving people a feel of what it is to be located wherever you want to and still serve a global market, has opened the imagination and again, the courage of how they pursue things. So I know of people who are sitting in what we call Bharat or tier 2, tier 3 India, and still delivering the highest quality work that we thought would only come from the top 5, 10 cities of this country, but is no longer limited to just that geographic sphere. And I think that's going to happen more and more in the future. It's not the cities that will experience necessarily the best growth. It's going to be a lot more inclusive geographically, and the youth of the country understands that and appreciates that. And the third is that they are reimagining education and thus skilling. As I said, they're clearly looking at education as something which is continuous and not one time. They know that the importance of college is not as much as it used to be in the past, and it's just one stepping stone to what would be a 5 to 10 year path. And after that, they have to reskill themselves, and that journey of reskilling continues to happen. It's incredible how many young people between 18 to 24-year-olds that I come across who have multiple income streams already, who wish to have that by design. They have a job, but they're also freelancing, they're also interning, they're also studying online somewhere, they're also on some projects, some apprenticeship, whatever it is. And they know that that is by design how they want to live life. They don't want to settle on just one thing, instead keep exploring what is there to offer. So when you combine these 3 things, I am super excited about what the next 20, 30 years are going to be, because you're sitting on the best demographic dividend that the country has. We have the highest population of youth in the world right now. They are going to not be limited by their geography, their ability to even step out of where they were, irrespective of the circumstances, irrespective of the education. And they are on a daily basis consuming success stories that are making them even more and more audacious and courageous in their ambition. And I think that's a potent mix. So as was said, that no one can stop an idea when its time has come. And I think that the time has come again.
No, I think it's very, very exciting and, very well put, the 3 attributes that you kind of outlined. But, all of them, right? Courage, risk, location agnostic and being lifelong learner actually lend itself exceedingly well to entrepreneurship. I think all of these are qualities that entrepreneurs need, especially global entrepreneurs, today, because you need to hire the best talent, you need to solve problems for the world. Historically, we've always believed that, we use a mechanism to solve challenges in India and use that frugal innovation to do a lot more globally. But today we have an opportunity to do that across the world nearly at the same time, because of course, of all the qualities that you rightly said and the right skills that can go and build up. And entrepreneurs also in a way, Ankur, create a lot of employment, address the ability to build new skills and things like that. So when it comes to our startup ecosystem, and young people are so excited by that word, how do you assess the startup ecosystem today, in India, and the way you're looking at it? How is that playing out in your mind as you interact more with young people?
So I became an entrepreneur in 2009, when becoming an entrepreneur was nearly not as cool as it is today. Back then, if you became an entrepreneur, it most likely meant that you didn't get a job out of college or something. But today it's fashionable, and there are so many, it's become primetime conversation. However, I believe that we are a country of entrepreneurs, and have always been so. The big difference has been that of scale. You literally have to go not beyond your immediate network of your family to have someone who owns a shop, is self-employed in some way, has what is called a business or a dhanda. When you have close to 60% of the population engaged in farming in some shape and form, not all of that is labor. There are enough and more independent farmers. They just have small pockets of land, but they are making their own things work. And that, one can argue theoretically, is being an entrepreneur, is essentially not being dependent on a monthly salary that someone else is cutting you, instead making your own income, your own expense, and hopefully your own profit. The big difference, I believe, that's happened in the last several decades is the scale with which we are imagining that. Earlier, self-employment was me, at best 2-3 people, a lot more of family members. It's a closely guarded, it's a privately held proprietorship. But now you'll see more and more LLPs, more and more private limited companies, a lot more funding happening at the venture capital level, the seed level, the private equity level. And that just essentially means that the same business idea of whether it is a restaurant that used to take orders over the phone, but now does it fancily through an app, or a laundry guy who used to come to your doorstep, collect your clothes and give them back ironed, now has it through an app. The fundamentals of business remain the same. It's just the execution and the mode that's different. And that just means technology is going to play a huge part. Thankfully, we have a very young population where almost every young individual is so comfortable with technology, that's the only way they think. As against our generation, which was not born into technology and had to move towards technology. And that was a cultural and a generational shift in our mindset. These people are born into it. So it's natural, it's default for them. Number two is they've seen how big things can be. So they're not limited by what their parents did. They're not limited by what their relatives have told them. They are dreaming big, and they know that they can go and raise money. They can run bootstrap businesses and yet make a lot of money. They're reading about these success stories in the news and the media and so on. And I am fundamentally very bullish about the startup community. I feel that we are going to have a very different trajectory than the largest economies in the world, which were largely manufacturing-led. We are going to be a services-led economy, and we're going to be a entrepreneurial or an entrepreneurship-led economy where jobs and economic strength will be created within domestically, will be consumed largely domestically. So the strength of the domestic consumer is very high, but will also be made for the entire world because it is not physical in nature. It can travel boundaries seamlessly and instantaneously. So I think the make in India, sell in India story is already robust and has been the biggest reason why our economy has also been in some way shielded from the global ups and downs of economic vagaries. But I think the make in India, sell outside of India story is equally propelling and is going to be massive in the next 20, 30 years. I also, with a little bit of course, sensitivity attached to it, believe that technologies such as blockchain are going to disrupt the way that we reimagine most things in the world as they happen today. And I'm not necessarily centered on crypto as such, because that's just one part of that. But fundamentally, the concept of decentralization and not having a central authority governing everything, but it being spread out, lends itself so well to how we can become the center of blockchain development for the world. We can become the center of intellectual capital for the world in this domain, not just blockchain, but technology in general. So I am very bullish, Rajan, on the startup ecosystem, taking us to a $5 or $10 trillion economy route, which we've already set ourselves on. And I won't be surprised that after 20, 25 years, when in some shape and form we are revisiting this conversation, it turns out that a large share of the GDP contribution has come from companies that are starting today or are going to start in the next decade.
I think that is a certainty. If one were to see, and it's not only India, Ankur, it's a global trend, right? If you go and see the top 10 companies today versus even 10 years ago, 15 years ago, at least the potential of a great economic enterprise, or the ability to disrupt, especially with technologies like blockchain or so many others. We've seen AI and so many other emerging technologies always get in a kind of a value proposition that is disruptively, different from even traditional ways of doing things. So I think that'll be a given, but it'll be very interesting to see where the winners are. What is it that really makes that happen, right? And you have had a great career, right? You've done, you've been an entrepreneur, and now you've become an author, right? And I think, is that a way for you to influence young minds better, to share your experiences, and we also live in this age of digital media, social impact, like little things that can just reach anywhere in the world so fast, and in a way there is also a power attached to that, right? I think to be able to put this collective together and use it to build a inclusive roadmap for a country like India. Like country like India cannot consider itself successful in 2047 if we've not really taken pretty much every Indian along, and been able to do that, right? So, I think one way, yes, we help people get better livelihoods and income, by creating more entrepreneurs, creating greater economic, kind of activity, and technology will definitely drive that. But on the other side, how do we then get this whole media and collective approach to help shape, the future of India? So how do we leverage this potential to its optimal level? And is writing just the beginning of other things you want to do in the media, or in that kind of space?
Yeah. So I've been deeply impacted, and in a positive manner, Rajan, by the teachers that I had in my life. And I was extremely lucky and fortunate to have the right set of guidance very early on, whether it was through my parents, whether it was through my school, college, thereafter, wonderful friends, mentors who have guided me through the journey. And I've made a lot of mistakes. So despite all the high quality talent that was around me, I still ended up making a lot of mistakes. And that just makes me committed to the ideology that teachers can actually impact a lot, especially when you think about the youth. But the definition and the image that we have of teaching in the country has remained more or less the same, which is this one lady or gentleman coming in, teaching, going through a course in a fixed set curriculum, maybe not even passionate about it, just doing it because it's their employment. And it's funny, the other day someone was telling me that, no, I'm really scared of maths and I want to do an MBA. And I found myself saying it's really tragic if somebody ends up saying, I'm scared of a subject. You may not like it, and that's totally okay. But being scared of a subject is really unfortunate. And that does mean that at some point of time, someone failed to sensitize you to the fact that this is just something that you may or may not like, but there's nothing to be scared about it. And it's just a temperament. And I've loved teaching all my growing up years. I think I've been a good one at that. So after running startups for a decade plus, when I stepped down as the CEO of my previous startup and I decided to figure out what I wanted to do next, it just intuitively came to me that I should think something around teaching. I didn't know exactly what. And as luck would have it, which has been a defining part of my life, COVID happened. Everyone was locked up. There was no movement as such. And I said, why don't I just start sharing whatever I know online? And a lot of people ask me, hey, what happened in the last 2 years that education in general has just exploded online? Where was this demand before it? Like, what happened to the students? And I'm like, no, it's not the students. It's actually the quality of teachers. Because the best quality of teachers were just busy doing something else. But now with nothing more to do, they started creating content and sharing it online. So the demand always existed. It was the quality of supply that went through the roof in the last 2 years. And that has now sensitized people to the fact that if you are genuinely good with whatever is it that you know, which could be a small microcosm of the larger world, you still can get an audience that is across the world just by the strength of digital, the internet, and of course, your own expertise in delivering. So I love this journey and I would love to undertake this journey for as far as it is. And I really feel that the youth is super smart to pick and choose where they learn from and what they learn and to what extent. And they are going to use this to the hilt. And as long as we have such platforms, such initiatives, such policies that facilitate digital learning and make it like any other thing, I feel we're setting ourselves up for massive success. Sorry, you're on mute.
I completely agree with you. I think there is a tremendous opportunity here. It's so bringing the right thought leaders together and the right thoughts together also, I think, make a massive difference. But, I think even to unlock the true potential of this, Ankur, as we've been discussing, I think innovation has to be a word, that is a verb, right? Everybody is innovating, especially in a country like India and with young people. I think, even the evolution of, multitasking and the way one can, do things is changing and, happening at a very rapid pace. So, how do we build this culture, right? And when you think of India and you think of the future and you think of innovation, right? What do you think we should be doing today, right, to ensure that this culture, or we're innovating in the right direction, innovation with purpose, or is it innovating with certain particular aspects in mind? So maybe your thoughts on innovation today to ensure we truly want.
So I think innovation has been in the country for a long time. We just call it jugaad because it sounds cooler and it just lends itself to a wonderful story. Our ability to move around and find solutions to what is the problem is very unique, and it has served us immensely well. What hasn't happened is for it to be structured enough so that it can become a process and thus a way of thinking. And I believe that is where the focus lies. So the DNA of the country is to be that jugaad seeking country, make things work, do it scrappy, but it needs to now be legitimized. And that, I believe, is going to happen through a combination of, one, education. There has to be stress during school and college around how your unique ideas and how your ability to have this jugaad in your mindset translates into a way of thinking. And I believe that that will happen through interdisciplinary education, which already has become part of the education scheme that was released. So I'm so happy with that, because you can't be a science student and then be taught jugaad, because jugaad is not what scientists do. They have to be clinical in their experiments. And if you're an art student, you will never know what the joy of experimentation and hypothesis building is, while you will understand that the world is gray and 0 and 1 and a continuum. So it's wonderful that all of that will get mixed. So that's education. I also believe that a wave of experience that the youth will get, not starting up, but working in startups, is going to make them more and more robust in their education, in their innovation mindset. You learn a lot, of course, when you run a business, but you learn a lot even while you are in the business and observing it. And which is very different from a corporate setup, a large giant where you just one brick in the wall, one spoke in the large wheel. Here you are a meaningful contributor. And I see such a huge difference between people who work in startups and people who pick up a corporate job, not to dismiss any, but just to come up with the comparison in the way that they think from an innovation perspective. So that's number 2. And number 3, I think what's also going to happen is we will see failure being acknowledged and hopefully at some point celebrated. Failing is not the end, and we all know that because we've lived life enough to see it. But early on, for people in their 20s, in their late teens, failing seems like the end. It just feels like life's over. I didn't clear that exam, I didn't clear that interview, I didn't clear that job, and that's it, khatam. And I feel when you'll have more and more people talking about failure, talking about how they came out of that failure, how they still made it, it is just going to make people at ease. It's going to liberate them in some way, make them feel a lot less anxious, a lot more confident of their decisions. So education, experience, and failure being story told in the form of learning, I believe will set the country up for an innovation-led mindset, as against just a obedience-led mindset that we may have had in the past.
Yeah, I think challenging the status quo is probably the source of all innovation in any case, right?
Yeah.
So I think, and you know, the role that media, government, stakeholders can play in celebrating failure, like we talk of the Silicon Valley mindset coming to India. You know, it comes in pockets of excellence, right? But somewhere, whose responsibility is it, right, to accept failure or to make it happen? I mean, when you think of it, how you know, sometimes it's easier said than done, right, Ankur? You know, I think we all say it, but you know, when it comes to, you know, one self-accepting failure, then convincing, and there are others who see your failure as a learning and a stepping stone to do more. But how do we change that mindset? I mean, it's a very important thing for us to change. I completely agree. You know, but when we go into education, we go into class, you know, the ones who are the bottom of the class, we start saying, oh, you're not smart enough, you know. So right from day one, you know, we are putting people into this mold of competition, and where looking good, whether you are good or not, is so important, you know. And then suddenly we say, now we should as a society accept failure, right? So, and you're involved with education, you're shaping the future of that. What will you do differently to make this happen?
You know, the beauty about failure, Rajan, and I've thought actively about it, is you don't need to hear everyone's failure to find comfort. You just need to hear one story to find comfort. And in 1.4 billion people, you will always have enough and more failure stories that are coming out. You really don't need to create this movement that says, oh, everyone's to share their failures and let's everyone go through that experience. You just need enough and more to make that happen, which I believe is already happening. When people come out and talk about their mental health, when people come out and talk about the fact that they didn't score as much in their school or in their college, when people come and talk about their failures of getting fired from a job or getting laid off from a job and still making it, when people come out of their stories of taking a break and struggling to find a start to their career all over again, all of this just gives confidence, and I think that is what is required. Comparison will never go away. I don't think the youth will ever get to a point where we'll be like, oh, मुझे फर्क नहीं पड़ता कि मेरे दोस्त के कितने नंबर आए हैं जब तक मेरे अच्छे नंबर आए हैं. We're never going to get to that point. That's just human psychology. That's just how the human mind is structured. We compare because that has served us for millions of years. But I think the comparison can either lead to a paralysis of action or could lead to challenging the status quo. And I believe you just need one failure story to use that comparison to challenge the status quo. When you're just saying, hey, if that person could do it and I feel inferior in some comparison set to the other person, I am now going to make sure I win. And I think I have an example that I can use to draw courage from.
Yeah, no, and I think the peer group, also getting to appreciate that, right, becomes an important thing. While you say, I completely agree with you, one will not stop comparing, but, you at least want to be able to respect people, with that till you start celebrating the ones with failure. I think it's a journey, right? It won't just happen from, it's not a switch which will happen from one to the other, but, it's it's a change in mindset. And that's why, you see Silicon Valley, right? When people have failed in entrepreneurial opportunities, you find them getting funded for the first time, they being actually celebrated, as entrepreneurs, especially when they achieve success, because you don't know how many failures it's going to reach to get to that. I think that culture, what you rightly said, is not a switch, is not going to be something one can force. But once we do that, and I think today's young generation, Ankur, you would probably know better, as you're closer to them. But even when I see my daughters and I see, so many other young people, they are so much more open to challenges, to these kinds of subjects. They appreciate a lot more than probably, the first question we started off, how is the youth of today different from the earlier times? Because once we're able to identify that difference and those strengths, then I think, whether it's policy, whether it's, industry, whether it's all of us as stakeholders, can then play, a very positive role in shaping that, in a particular manner. But, talking of leadership and, how young people are going to, lead at the front, what do you think that, and this is a question I'm going to ask you to more about from a government perspective, right? How do we really unlock the power of our youth, right? I mean, what can be something that, a central government, a state, a city-based municipal corporation or a gram panchayat in a village, can do, to encourage and unlock the true power of this youth demographic dividend that we, talk of, right? Is there something that you think we can do? Any thoughts?
No, I genuinely believe that it can happen and it needs to happen. In my opinion, there are three parts to it. One is curriculum, second is community, and the third is feedback. I'll go through each one. Curriculum, for the longest time, has been the domain of the government. They have set what should be studied, at what grade should be studied, and so on. I do believe that the government can focus its energy now on decentralizing education. And what I mean by that is, while you define the contours of what needs to be taught at a school level, at a college level, broaden this out. Think about skills that help people get ahead in life, whether they are academic or life skills, and then allow people to come and crowdsource what should be the content, while you act as the curator of quality, not the creator of the content. That decentralizes this to the first level, because now you have the world wanting to help you. You don't have to help yourselves as such. There are enough and more people who can teach biology better than most biology teachers in this country, but they don't teach it professionally. They love to do it as a passion. And we can always get them, and so many other such examples, to democratize education and make that accessible to anybody who has a smartphone and an internet connection. And that should be, in my opinion, down at the municipal level, all the way to the central government, the ambition when it comes to the education plan or the curriculum. Second is community. Unfortunately, we have always been geographically bound. While when you look at the youth today, and yours is a great example, like when kids game, they are no longer gaming individually. They're gaming as part of a community. And that is then displayed on how they are creating connections on platforms such as Discord, or coming up with their own network where they perhaps don't even know each other. And yet they're learning from each other because that's what they thrive in. So if you can facilitate communities which are not geographic, I don't want to be limited to my own village, school, class. I want to be exposed to the entire world, and I can because I have something to offer. Then the facilitation of that is necessary. Today, unfortunately, most of the networks that the youth are part of are for either entertainment or for education, but they are not domestic, they are not national players, and they are not orchestrated to make that community happen. They just navigate their way through and make it happen, but most people just get lost in the way. If we can genuinely make that happen, then that would be a terrific way for people to learn, irrespective of where they are. And third is feedback, which is let them do some concrete work, whether it is a platform for projects, a platform for internships, a platform for opportunities at a student level, and then give them high quality feedback on how they are doing, because that feedback will then help them reassess what they need to skill themselves on, go back to the first step of curriculum, become part of a community to make that happen, and then come back to that feedback loop again. All of this will ultimately get them absolutely skilled and not wait for a job to happen. They will know that they can create their own jobs. And that is where they will need to exercise a lot more control. I understand that the government's job seems to be creating more jobs, but I do believe at some point of time it has to shift to how can people create their own jobs as against waiting for jobs to happen in the economy.
Yeah, no, I think, and this is a very good virtuous cycle, right, that you say, because after the feedback, you go back to curriculum, and that new curriculum will create an extension of an existing community, but keep some of the broad-based concepts of that community, whether it's the values, whether it's many other things that get built over time, intact as well, and I think that's again a big way to, to see what you want to retain and what needs to change. While what you rightly pointed out in the beginning, that it's no longer a career for a lifetime, but it's probably a lifetime of careers, run in sprints rather than one marathon. And how does the youth prepare, itself to be able to, take full advantage of the opportunity that is there? And probably preparation is what then creates the opportunity too. So it's all kind of tied in, but no, that's a great point. And I think a holistic thinking like this across policy making is probably something that is required both across ministries, but also, as we look at, state and even village panchayats, because the opportunities and the skills required in those areas or specific areas would be distinctly different from, maybe some other geographic areas, while you do have certain sets of capabilities that could be, of course, generically relevant. But But I think been great conversation, and I don't know how 45 minutes have gone by, Ankur, but this last section, I want to spend the next few minutes really talking about the vision, right? I mean, when you wake up, how do you see the dream of an India? When you look at a vision for inclusive India, what are you seeing? And what's your dream, for India?
I have an audacious one, and that is that anybody in this country with a smartphone and internet connection sits on the exact same opportunities that students of the best institutions sit on. And that is my dream. That is my vision. And I don't think it is impossible. I do think it will take a lot of effort, perhaps time. But if we set our goals on that, then that would be the first step in my direction.
No, I think creating that opportunity democratized through technology and inherently building the ability to learn throughout one's life are, I think, very key messages that you brought out, that I think not only are your dream, but are probably your reality today, right? And you're working and putting your whole effort, to make that happen. So I think if you succeed over the next 25 years in this, the country will. So let's see how we can get more to your army and more, people to align to this thought process, particularly people of our generation. And I think this could be, our way of telling the next generation, we're leaving a better India, a better world for you than, what we inherited. And I think that's probably one, powerful purpose that people like us can have, as we move on this journey. But Ankur, it's been such a pleasure chatting with you and covering these different aspects and getting to know you better. But one thing I'm going to take you on is that I'm going to, find ways to have you more engaged, in some of these initiatives as we continue to move forward towards, India at 100. As a Honorable Prime Minister, I had to say the Amrit Kal for India is just beginning. It's the Sone ki Chiriya that India was. How do we bring that same India back, to the fore in the world? And I think all of us need to play our own little small role, to making that happen. But on that note, once again, thank you, and been a pleasure chatting with you, and look forward to engaging further as we move ahead.
Thank you so much for having me, Rajan. Thank you for facilitating that, and happy to contribute in any manner that I can. This is a passionate project for me, so I'm happy that someone's attention, as rightfully as yours, is on it. And if I can be of any help, more than help.
Look forward. Thank you so much.